A renewed nightmare. The resurgence of violence. The world watched in horror as the Israel-Palestine conflict erupted once again in a devastating cycle of violence. The echoes of past skirmishes and wars reverberated through the airwaves, reminding everyone of the fragile peace that had always been hanging by a thread. On October 6, 2023, Hamas, the militant group controlling the Gaza Strip, launched a surprise attack on Israel. This sudden and brutal assault caught many off guard, reigniting fears and tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface. This attack, unprecedented in its scale and audacity, marked a grim turning point in the decades-long conflict. The sheer intensity and coordination of the assault were unlike anything seen in recent years, signaling a significant escalation in the hostilities. It shattered any semblance of peace and plunged the region into a new chapter of bloodshed and despair. The streets, once bustling with life, were now scenes of devastation, with buildings reduced to rubble and lives torn apart. The images that flooded our screens were both shocking and tragically familiar. Families huddled in fear, children crying, and communities once again bracing for the worst. Rockets rained down on Israeli cities, while Israeli airstrikes pounded Gaza. The relentless exchange of fire painted a grim picture of the escalating violence with no end in sight. The death toll climbed with terrifying speed, and the human cost of this latest chapter in the conflict became horrifyingly clear. Hospitals struggled to cope with the influx of casualties, and the humanitarian crisis deepened with each passing day. This recent flare-up serves as a stark reminder of the deep-seated animosity and mistrust that fuel this seemingly intractable conflict. The wounds of history run deep, and the scars of past confrontations are far from healed. It underscores the fragility of any progress made and the urgent need for a peaceful resolution. Diplomatic efforts, though persistent, often seem like a Sisyphean task, with each step forward met by 2 steps back. But as the dust settles and the world grapples with the aftermath, one question looms large. Is there any hope for a lasting peace in this troubled land? The yearning for peace is palpable, yet the path to achieving it remains fraught with challenges. The violence has sent shockwaves far beyond the immediate region, raising concerns about wider instability and the potential for the conflict to ignite a broader conflagration. The international community watches with bated breath, aware that the repercussions could be far-reaching. As international actors scramble to de-escalate the situation and broker a ceasefire, the world holds its breath, hoping against hope that this latest chapter of violence will not become the prologue to an even greater tragedy. The stakes have never been higher, and the need for a lasting solution has never been more urgent. A century of conflict, tracing the roots of enmity. To understand the current crisis, we must delve into the tangled history of the Israel-Palestine conflict, a century-long saga of displacement, violence, and broken promises. This conflict has left deep scars on both societies, shaping their identities and their futures. The roots of this conflict run deep, entwined with competing claims to the same land and fueled by historical grievances that continue to shape the present. These grievances are not just historical footnotes, but living memories that influence current events and attitudes. The seeds of conflict were sown in the early 20th century, with the rise of both Zionism, a movement advocating for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, and Palestinian nationalism, which sought self-determination for the Arab population living in the region. These 2 national movements, each with its own vision and aspirations, set the stage for a prolonged struggle. The British, who controlled Palestine after World War I, struggled to reconcile these competing aspirations, and their efforts to find a solution only exacerbated tensions. Their policies often appeared contradictory, promising support to both sides, which only deepened the mistrust and animosity. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War led to Israel's creation, but also resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, an event known as the Nakba, or catastrophe. This mass displacement created a refugee crisis that persists to this day, with generations of Palestinians living in exile or under occupation. This displacement, along with Israel's subsequent occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip in 1967, forms the crux of the ongoing conflict. The occupation has led to numerous human rights violations and has been a major point of contention in peace negotiations. Over the decades, numerous attempts have been made to broker peace, but all have ultimately faltered. Each failed attempt has left both sides more disillusioned and skeptical of the peace process. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s offered a glimmer of hope, but the process ultimately unraveled, leaving behind a legacy of broken trust and dashed expectations. The failure of Oslo has been a significant setback, making future negotiations even more challenging. Today, the two-state solution, once seen as the most viable path to peace, seems increasingly distant as violence and mistrust continue to plague the region. The ongoing conflict affects every aspect of life, from daily security to economic stability, making the dream of peace seem ever more elusive. The October upsurge, Hamas's assault, and Israel's retaliation. This marked a significant escalation in the long-standing conflict between the two sides. The recent escalation began with a brazen and meticulously planned assault by Hamas on October 6, 2023. This attack was not just another skirmish, but a well-coordinated offensive that took months of planning. The attack, launched from multiple fronts, caught Israel off guard and sent shockwaves through the country. The sheer scale and intensity of the assault left many Israelis in a state of shock and disbelief. Hamas militants infiltrated Israeli territory, killing civilians and clashing with Israeli forces in numerous locations. The infiltration was unprecedented in its scope, leading to widespread panic and chaos. The scale and ferocity of the attack shocked seasoned observers, demonstrating a level of coordination and military capability that few had anticipated from Hamas. Analysts were left questioning how such an operation could have been executed without prior detection. Simultaneously, a barrage of rockets rained down on Israeli cities, targeting civilian populations and sowing terror across the country. The relentless rocket fire forced thousands into bomb shelters, disrupting daily life. Israel, reeling from the surprise attack, responded with overwhelming force. The Israeli military quickly mobilized, deploying troops and launching counteroffensives to regain control. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, launched airstrikes targeting Hamas infrastructure in Gaza, including tunnels, weapons depots, and command centers. The airstrikes aimed to cripple Hamas's operational capabilities. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared war on Hamas, vowing to inflict an unprecedented price for the attack. His speech galvanized the nation, rallying support for the military campaign. The conflict quickly escalated into a full-blown war, with both sides exchanging heavy fire. The intensity of the fighting showed no signs of abating as each side sought to gain the upper hand. The situation on the ground remained fluid and dangerous, with reports of ongoing fighting and casualties mounting on both sides. Hospitals and emergency services were overwhelmed by the influx of wounded. The international community condemned the violence and called for an immediate ceasefire, but their pleas fell on deaf ears as the cycle of violence raged on. Diplomatic efforts were underway, but achieving peace seemed a distant hope amidst the ongoing hostilities. Trapped in the crossfire, the devastating toll on civilians,